Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a glorious week. I want to welcome you to what will be the last episode of this season. For this episode, I thought we'd go back to not necessarily the basics, but thinking through and reflective on everything that happened during the year. I find that the best way to do that is frankly ask all of you in the audience what you want me to talk about and answer all the questions you might have. I haven't done one of these episodes in over a year. And I think on a go forward basis, at least once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on whether I notice there are interesting trends, I'll do some of these Ask Me Anything questions. I've actually sent notifications and asked you to send questions. So I'm ready to have a whole bunch of questions to start addressing. But in the meantime, feel free to enter your questions you have that you want me to address in chat, and we'll take it from there. So with any further ado, let's get going. Welcome to episode 34 of Playing with Unicorns, Ask Me Anything. So perhaps not too surprisingly, a lot of the questions I got this year were around surrounding in general crypto, NFTs, etc. And so there'll be a whole bunch of questions that I'll be answering on that topic specifically. So one of the first questions that was posed to me is, once the kinks are worked out, what would the ideal DAO look like were used for venture or syndicating? I guess perhaps taking a quick second to say what a DAO is, which is basically this decentralized organization, kind of maybe an equivalent to the limited liability corporate, the LLC format, where people come together with decentralized decision making to do something, whatever that thing may be. It could be to invest in startups. It could be to buy the Constitution, or as some have tried to do. And so in this case, the question is specifically for DAOs related to venture or syndicated. And so to answer the questions like, what would the ideal format look like? I suspect it's the usual, it depends. And to me, it depends on what you're optimizing for. So if you're optimizing for speed, then you want a small DAO, with only a few people and multisig. If you're optimizing for deal flow, then you definitely want the key experts in the space to be a part of this. If for reach or depth in the community, then the number of people and having the right people. If it's the ease of decentralized consensus, a simple front-end notification system for participants to be able to accept or deny. In other words, form follows function. So the ideal DAO will be case dependent. Let's see, next question from IJ. Is play to earn a pyramid scheme? So play to earn is this new big trend in gaming and in crypto, where now you can get paid in order to play the game. And it was popularized by currently the second largest revenue generator on the crypto space, a game called Axie Infinity. And so the answer to is play to earn a pyramid scheme is, the answer is no from my perspective, because it has utility beyond you people buying out the old people. You use it, you use the currency, or think of like the NFTs or the player skins, or you can use it to design levels, etc. And so because it has inherent utility, it's not a Ponzi scheme. Now, that said, for the value of the token increase, you need more new people to come in, the new money and people to come in the ecosystem for it to grow. But that's also true in general of many things in the world, where supply and demand, when there's more demand than supply, prices go up, and when supply increases or demand declines, prices go down. But there is utility. It is one of the new mega trends in gaming. In fact, I think there's a question on the future of gaming coming later. And I'll address that. But play to earn is here to stay. It's probably the biggest trend in gaming in 2022, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves with games that are frankly more compelling than Axie Infinity, which is okay, but not really a fun game. What is my most recommended book and why? Again, the answer is different people are built differently. Like some people have the favorite food, the favorite movie, the favorite book. I usually have my favorites plural, and I'm not sure I have a favorite. You know, if you have multiple kids, I'm sure you like all of your kids. And so I guess it's context dependent. My favorite book of the year from a fun read is Project Hail Mary by the founder of The Martian. It's kind of Robinson Crusoe in space with Friday on a glorious mission to save humanity. So it's actually better than The Martian. Now, in terms of nonfiction books that I've read this year that I found extraordinary, there's a whole bunch. There's Stealing Fire and how you harness flow states in order to be more effective, which by the way is not necessarily the main reason you want to be harnessing flow states. There's I've read Why We Sleep, and even though he exaggerates the case, I think improving sleep is actually fundamentally important. And then maybe more generally in terms of like books that I've loved that are kind of universal, it's things like Short Story of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. These days I've been going down a kind of a psychedelic rabbit hole from a reading perspective, and so I read all the books like How to Change Your Mind, This Is Your Mind on Plants. What other books have I read on the topic? Stealing Fire kind of covers that as well. And then perhaps on like the history of capitalism, there's a book called Americana, which is amazing. So like on the history of how the U.S. became the dominant superpower of the 20th century, and definitely worth a read if you want to understand like the underlying conditions that led us to being where we are today. I'll pause on the pre-provided questions and answers to the questions that are live. So LinkedIn user, why don't VCs invest in hardware? The problem with the hardware investments is it's typically very capital intensive to get going. So you need more money than a software startup to get the ball rolling. And the issue is, should your idea work and hit product market fit, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to copy you. And historically, the margins compress. So you face margin compression and you start seeing this hardware cycle where every year you need to release a new version. And if for some reason you miss that and some other competitor releases a better version, you might die. And you're seeing it frankly in the public markets as well, when you see the hardware companies that sometimes go up and down pretty dramatically based on the release cycles, the competition, etc. And so if you look at the outcomes for GoPro, DJI, etc., it's actually rather up and down. And as a VC, when we invest in a startup, there's a real barrier to entry. The barrier to entry is the execution itself. But usually we like businesses that have network effects. The more you execute, the more built-in knowledge there is, and that creates its own barrier to entry. And software, as I said, is a lot more scalable. Most VC follows kind of this trend where pre-launch, pre-seed, we want to invest $1 million. Then with that, you get to a little bit of product market fit, you launch, then you're ready to see your seed round of like 3 million, 4 million. Then with that, you get your A round of like 8, 10 million. With that, you get your B round of 20, 25 million, and so on and so forth. And ideas that pre-turning the lights on need a lot more capital don't really fit well in the VC ecosystem or system. Let's see, Javier Palacios asks, hi Fabrice, I think that the Amazon Shopify VA seller roll-up is a fantastic model, and I'm wondering if you've seen many interesting applications. Thrasio for X and other markets that could be compelling. So totally agreed. The Thrasio model, in fact, Thrasio I think is the quickest company to go from 0 to $1 billion in valuation, which I think happened in sub 2 years. There's a lot of value here because when you're buying these fulfilled by Amazon type of startups, you can bring a lot of levers to play. So they're mostly created by individual mom and pop owners who are not really sophisticated, but they hit on a product market fit, and there are consumers that love the product and they're providing the products and they're doing really well. But they are usually product experts. They're not necessarily experts at managing your supply chain, improving, doing online marketing, doing CRM, doing CLM, negotiating better rates with Amazon, negotiating better rates with their own suppliers. And so when the Thrasio type companies come over and buy them, they can actually really A, cross-sell those products to their existing user bases, and B, use their expertise in online marketing and purchasing and fulfillment and customer care to provide a much better experience. And so they take a company that they buy at a 3, 4, 5x EBITDA multiple and make it worth a lot more by inflecting the margin structure and the growth. And we haven't necessarily seen Thrasio for X, like, oh, we're rolling up specific categories, but we've seen Thrasio for different types of geographies. And we at FJ Labs have invested in a Thrasio for Latin America called Valerio. We've invested in Razor Group in Europe, which is a Thrasio for Europe. And we've invested in a number of Thrasio type players around the world. We did Thrasio for India. We did a few for the US. And so it's a super compelling space. It's a big mega trend of the last 12 months. And there have been a few more of these mega trends, like the 15-minute grocery delivery, but the Thrasio's model has definitely been one of those mega trends, and we've definitely invested in it in a very aggressive way. Now, could there be a vertical Thrasio? We're only going to roll up these types of companies? Absolutely. Verticalization has been a mega trend as well across different industries. Hasn't happened yet, as far as I can tell, but there's no reason for it not to happen. You can imagine that your expertise in sourcing and products in a given category gives you comparative advantage. So I can totally see it happen. Right now, it's been Thrasio across different geos rather than Thrasio for a vertical, but it will happen. Cameron, we are ready to roll out our beta launch product for a toy store mobile app. Can you invite me to it? Sure. What's better than inviting me to a beta app is actually when you're ready to raise, send me a deck. LinkedIn is really the best way, and the team will review when and if appropriate. And so just do it once you're ready. So whenever you're going to market and raise your $1 million pre-seed or your $3 million seed or whatever, is the time with a deck to approach me. Always include, what you're building, the traction you have, and the deck, so we can make a decision on whether or not it's appropriate for us directly in the message, as opposed to saying, hey, I have an amazing idea. Please just send it, please reply or whatever. Like, give me enough information that we can make the decision as to whether or not this is for us in the message. All right, no, Sarad. Hi, Fabrice, what do you think about fractioning assets in art, for instance, and accessibility to more people and reducing the entrance ticket? So many people have tried fractioning assets. To date, all the real estate fractionalization companies have kind of failed, like Realty Shares and many others that have raised tremendous amounts of money, all went bankrupt. Hard to tell. Well, I think the operational complexity of it, perhaps the not necessarily moral hazard, but like the owner, principal, or manager dilemma between very diversified owners at different types of incentive structures. But I have not seen many that work, but there are definitely a lot of people trying it. I've seen a few trying it in art as well. And I think there's a few, we might even be investors in one called, I don't know if it's not Roadster or Roadrunner, but I'll have to try to remember the name. But yes, I think we've invested in a few. I think they're doing well, but not as extraordinarily well as you might imagine. But perhaps in crypto, the costs of fractionalizing assets might decrease to the point that might make sense. The issue is what do you do with it, right? Like, I remember we invested in a company a long time ago, over a decade ago, where 10 people would buy whatever $1 million painting for $100,000 a pop, and they would have it a tenth of the time. And the company was organizing the shipping between the different owners, and it was rather complicated. Ultimately, that one failed. I've seen some, of course, for lower amounts, fractionalized around more people that are doing okay, but so far I haven't seen a breakout company in the category. Yes, Masterworks is an example of that, though I don't think that's the one we're investors in. Going back to the other list, while more people in chat ask questions, will you write a book? Maybe at some point. I've often wanted to write a book, but actually not in entrepreneurship per se, but more on how to lead a life, how to be fulfilled, how to create work-life balance, how to find your purpose in life, and what are all the tricks that you can use as a means of focusing your time on the things that matter to you, which, by the way, doesn't need to be productive. It could be, spending time with friends and family, or playing tennis or video games, etc. But the time has to be right. I try to do things in flow. I mean, when I'm called to them, like I write blog posts when I'm called to write a blog post versus when I feel obligated to write a blog post. Same thing, in fact, with this show, Playing Unicorns, I do it when I have the time, I'm in the right setting, and I have a topic that seems timely or that I really want to talk about. And so the answer is probably. In the meantime, though, you'll find in a kind of more disjointed way, collections of thoughts and writings on my blog at fabricecorinta.com. Now, again, sometimes I'm very prolific, sometimes I'm not so prolific, more typically related with my normal workload, and also general inspiration about what I want to work about. And of course, on the blog, it's kind of all over the place. It's like how to make decisions, entrepreneurship, etc. The unifying theme that I think I would want to write about is how to lead a good life and how to structure your life effectively to do that, because most people I know are not actually fundamentally happy, fulfilled. They haven't found their purpose. And I actually think there are a number of tools, tricks, best practices on how to lead an amazing life that most people don't. Frankly, and that's true at every income level, at every stage of life, etc. So probably one day, not anytime soon, too busy leading the life and running FJ Labs and like thinking about new ideas and frankly having a blast. Plus, I had a son this year, so spending time with him and spending time with my family is absolutely amazing. Why is your Twitter so dead? Can you tweet more often? I guess that comes part back to how to lead a life. What I do to avoid unhappiness, or actually to avoid negativity in life, is in one of the life lessons. And the best way to avoid negativity is to not consume media. Don't follow the news. Don't follow newspapers, TV news, even worse. You need to remember those are media companies who are trying to capture your attention in order to sell you ads. That's their business model. And because we are easily outraged, they've created this like outrage culture. So if you're in the right, they're in extreme right, they're gonna like try to show you woke outrage, and if you're in the extreme left, they're going to try to show you whatever Trump or anti-immigration, whatever outrage, in order to capture your attention to sell you ads. That is not healthy for you, nor do I think any of this is relevant. If you look at news, it's highly repetitive. It's it's more speculative, or it's more opinion than anything else, and it doesn't really cover the relevant things. To me, the relevant things happen slowly over time. The most relevant things of the last 20, 30 years are like 1 billion people coming out of poverty in India and China. It's the smartphone revolution, where you're now a poor Indian farmer and you have access to the sum total of humanity's knowledge through Google and Wikipedia. You have free global communications on video through WhatsApp. You basically have more information and communications that the president of the US had 20 years ago. Those things are extraordinary and mind-boggling, but they're not really being covered. And so avoid news. And that's part of the reason I don't really consume Twitter. Like Twitter is a lot of opinion, a lot of reaction on like whatever the outrage or whatever events are happening. And so I use it more as a promoting or writing on things that I'm writing about. So if I write a blog post, I will push it on Twitter. If I'm doing an episode like this one, I will push it on Twitter, and I'll push it on other platforms as well. But reading other people's comments and opining on them, or even sharing tidbits, I don't know, I'd rather lead the life than share it from that perspective. Feels like too time consuming, too generally negative. And this is kind of my approach in social media writ large, by the way. I mean, I'll post on Instagram once in a while, but it's maybe once every 2 weeks. If I feel so inspired, and sometimes there'll be months between posts. And yeah, I'll follow topics that interest me and check it once in a while. But again, avoid social media addiction. It's not particularly healthy or interesting, and mostly negative. Alex Key, I just want to ask you, how is aged care profitable as a business in the USA? Not sure what aged care is. So I'm not sure I can answer very intelligently. Maybe you mean retirement homes or retirement communities, but I'm not sure. Michelle Thomas, I always enjoy your episodes. Well, hi, Michelle. Thank you for the kind words. Anastasia. Dear Fabrice, I wish to ask about fundraising tactics and different kinds of financing options available to start up business, comparing the different routes of getting investment, for instance, VC versus crowdfunding. Would you find the most flexible, independent way of raising capital while still retaining your identity as a founder, freedom of creativity, and decision making in terms of strategy and management style? Can you please share your knowledge, experience, and the main benefits versus disadvantages of alternative options? Well, Anastasia, as usual, the answer is it depends. Depends what you're trying to build. It depends the scale, ambition of the project that you have. We need to remember that every year there are millions of startups, or not startups, new companies that are being built. But startups specifically that are seed funded by VCs with at least 500K in funding, there's only 5,000 per year. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny number. And so if you're building so most entrepreneurs and micro entrepreneurs are not building startups that are meant to be or aspire to be billion-dollar companies. And so if you're building whatever, the neighborhood pizzeria because your family is into it or whatever, or a nail store or a nail salon, obviously these types of funding is not appropriate. In which case you try to get debt funding from your bank, you try to get donations or investments from friends and family, and you could do things like crowdfunding. Now, if you are aspiring to build a billion-dollar company, it actually helps to be in the VC ecosystem. It helps to raise from the proper angels and pre-seed VCs and seed VCs that frankly will direct you and guide you and help you in the future to both make the right decisions, but frankly help you fundraise. I mean, the main superpower we have at FJ Labs is finding you follow-on capital. Because we don't lead and we don't price, we work with all these other VCs from Bessemer to Catalyst and Andreessen to Sequoia to Tiger, and we send them our best deals. And so the best or the idea, if you're trying to build these types of companies, having people like us on board is extraordinarily helpful. Now, again, your idea needs to be appropriate for it, right? Like, does it meet the capital requirements and the growth requirements and the margin requirements that can allow you to build a billion-dollar company? And so it depends. I think if you're trying to build something big, totally worth it. I don't know any of the decacorns or super unicorns, companies worth billions that were built through crowdfunding, to be honest. But I do know many of those built through VC. That said, crowdfunding, if you're trying to do something, again, smaller scale, donation based, etc., makes a lot of sense. And I've seen many projects on Kickstarter, right? If you're doing hardware, going back to the questions someone asked earlier, actually doing pre-sales on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, I don't remember the exact name, is actually an amazing approach for getting funding. By the way, new forms of funding that'll happen in the future is as you get, for instance, if you're building B2B SaaS business and you have high margin and highly predictable revenues, debt funding is becoming available. So debt is now a new revolution in the funding space for certain types of businesses, not completely applicable at all. But if you have a large direct-to-consumer business and you need to fund your inventory and your margin structure is proven, you can start getting debt. And companies like SVB will get you deadlines for that. We work with a broker that helps many companies actually get deadlines. Now, again, it's not for funding your operations. You need to have good unit economics, but it's for funding your inventory. It's for funding your or if you have a SaaS business with a successful monthly recurring revenue, MRR, you can also get that against that. And in fact, there are companies like Clearco, which my brother works in and that we're investors in, that helps startups fund their marketing. So if they'll log in and look at your Google and Facebook, and they'll see that if your marketing is profitable, they'll not exactly structure a loan, but essentially lend you money for you to spend money in marketing until the point of marginal profitability. Javier Palacios, will there be an EIR program this year? So there will not be a formal EIR program this year, just because I'm dying. Way too busy. The problem with the EIR program is amazing, right? We get to go to Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Wharton, Columbia. We get 250 applicants. And of the 250, we pick 2, and then we train them for a year and a half, and then they join as EIRs, and then we build a company together. That's amazing. And we've built like over probably a dozen companies in the last decade, and it's worked really well. The issue is because we need to work very closely together, it takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time at many levels. It takes a lot of time in the recruiting process and training and coming up with the ideas. Then we're on the board, and then we're helping you fundraise. And that's one thing that is not super scalable in my life, is actually more time. And right now we're raising Fund 3 for FJ Labs, and we're kind of halfway there. We've raised like 200 at like 400 million we want to raise, so that's taking a lot of time. We have a SPAC out, and we need to find a target to merge with, to de-SPAC. We're doing more deals than ever before. I think historically we've done 125 deals a year. This year we're going to do 250 to 500 to 300 deals. So the largest number of deals ever. And so beyond busy, I'm working harder than I would like. And so putting the program on a pause, which by the way still means that we still have EIRs. We had a new EIR join in September, and we have a new one starting in January. So we still have like 2 companies to build. That said, feel free to send me a message and apply. Occasionally, opportunistically, someone that happens to be the perfect fit, and we feel we're not going to die like onboarding them, we might take them. So I guess the EIR program, instead of being a formal program where we recruit for it and we try to build companies explicitly, will be more an ad hoc program. People apply, and based on the fit, we decide. And it's going to be split in 2 programs. First-time founders that need more handholding will be in the normal historical program, and second or third-time founders who really want to work with us, but they already have their idea, or they have a sense of where they want to build, they need us less, will be on or less involved 10% program. So, but again, we're not going to formally try to get more deals. It's going to be more ad hoc, like you apply, we like you, let's do it. Okay, Christopher. Hi, Fabrice. Thanks so much for your implication to each episode. What's your number 1 rule and big mistakes not to do for a French entrepreneur team going pre-seed in the US? I'm assuming you're a French entrepreneur team, but you're raising money in the US, but you're also going after the US market, right? If you're going after the French market, I would definitely not raise money in the US at pre-seed or seed, etc. It doesn't really make sense. Once you reach the scale that is relevant in France to go to the other markets, or you're large enough to attract American investors, great. Now, if you're going after the US market, which is actually my assumption here, make sure you speak English amazingly well, right? Make sure that you're the CEO, the face person of the company, really, because you're going to be evaluated by VCs on how amazing a storyteller you are, how well you can build and execute in the business. So make sure your English is as good as you can make it. Practice and rehearse your pitch as much as possible. And never give the impression that you're in the US temporarily. Like, you're here for good. This is the market you're going after. This is your life's mission. You're here to live the American dream. The US market is your core focus, maybe your sole focus, and do not even create the idea of doubt. Now, pre-seed is probably at a point where you're going more to angels, honestly, than VCs. There are not very many VCs in pre-seed. There's like Amplify and A4, but really not too many. But that said, make sure that the sole focus is on the US market, and obviously have as good English as possible. Okay, next question sort of submitted. How soon do you think humans will be interplanetary? I suppose that the answer depends on Starship, frankly. That's probably the Elon's Starship at SpaceX is probably the quickest way we can become really truly interplanetary. Elon usually gets things done, but his timelines and time projections are way overly optimistic on everything. I think he says like he wants to be in Mars by 2024 or something like that. But probably next decade. I'd say in the 2030s. I wouldn't be surprised if we had the beginnings of a base that's installed there and a few people that are spending some time there. So that'll be the basis of it. I'm not sure if we could call that necessarily interplanetary. If we had a disaster on Earth the colony on Mars would still die out because it wouldn't be able to have access to its own resources. So it would be really only truly independent to the point where it's growing its own food, it's making its own fuel, etc. And that would probably take a certain amount of scale. So from that perspective, it'll take decades longer, but we're going to get there. Now, this depends on Starship actually working. Otherwise, the timelines will be a lot longer. And getting something like Starship to work at that scale and the cost that they're looking for is extremely difficult. May happen, may not happen, TBD. But it's exciting to watch from the sidelines, and I'm excited to be part of it. Very small investor indirectly in SpaceX through an investment I made in Founders Fund back in the day. So very happy to be seeing this grow and to see the evolution in the space race. And at the same time, by the way, I'm also excited for everything that Starlink is going to bring to bear, especially as a potential consumer of Starlink as I travel around the world and I'm in places that are rather remote where internet doesn't work particularly well. Do you think there are non-intelligent human species like humans, non-octopus or crows? I think there's a double negative in there. Are there non-intelligent human species? Very likely, I would say. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the coming century we find evidence of, frankly, even actual life forms that are non-intelligent in maybe in the moons of Jupiter and on the massive oceans under the ice cores, and maybe evidence of bacteria, etc., that used to exist or may still exist in Mars. And I think the question is actually meant to be the opposite. Maybe are there intelligent species? I guess suggesting that maybe octopus and crabs are not intelligent enough. I suspect the answer is yes as well. That'll take a lot longer to find, just because of the way the size of the universe. I think it's 10 to the power 25 meters, and the speed of light getting anywhere at the current technology, unless we can find a way to create wormholes and like fly through time or fly through space effectively, is such that I think it'll take a long time to figure out the answer to that. And especially since the way of looking through signals through telescopes may not be super effective, as even for us, I think we'll stop sending these types of missions in the future. So there are probably going to be other alternative means of looking for intelligence than like scanning the heavens for radio signals. But do I suspect that they'll come to fruition and discover life anytime soon? Yeah, maybe through luck, but the universe is so vast and big, probably not in the coming century. But if it does, it'll be fantastic, I suspect. It'll be interesting. It'll perhaps help us put aside some of our differences and realize we are all human. If you go to space, and maybe that's one of the beauty of like going to space and the Blue Origins or SpaceX or Virgin Galactic, and from space you see when you see the curvature of the Earth, there are no borders. I mean, all these things are like human inventions. Like we're creating these differences between us, where in fact we are extraordinarily similar. I think humans are 99.7% or 97% genetically identical. We're more similar to each other than most other species. Apparently, there was a big ice age about 100,000 years ago where the human population went below 1,000 individuals. And so we are all today the descendants of these 1,000 individuals. And as a result, we're extremely similar. And yet we are creating these artificial differences between us and these in-group, out-group dynamics. So hopefully we can find something to unify around. And who knows, it might be other catastrophic events, right? Like perhaps climate change, etc. When it becomes the clear and present danger, we will rally as humanity. But then again, I'm an optimist. I see the best in people, and I think most people are inherently good and are trustworthy. But there are circumstances that leads to creating division that I think we can try to avoid. Oscar, thoughts on the future of Europe and the EU? The European project is interesting. There are a lot of things that were built a little bit stupidly in its inception because they were requiring you're putting together countries that are fundamentally different, that have different economic cycles and different underlying economic conditions, and tying them in one currency. You of course remove the fiscal element from their ability to, or sorry, the currency element from being able to adjust their economies. And so now all the adjustments need to be made through fiscal adjustments, which sometimes can be extraordinarily painful, and some countries are or are not willing to do it. I'll give you two cases to answer your question, Oscar. The optimistic case, by the way, is that we're seeing an extraordinary democratization of technology company creation. We've seen an evolution where 20 years ago, you needed, actually more than 20 years ago, you needed to be in Silicon Valley, you needed millions of dollars to turn the lights on, you needed specific knowledge and skill sets to build startups. And that was really only in one location where the capital and the expertise was there. But first, we had the open source revolution, the MySQL, PHP, Python, etc. So you no longer needed Oracle database services. You no longer need Microsoft Web Services, etc. Then you add the cloud computing revolution with AWS, where you could variabilize your costs. And now you have the no-code revolution, where more and more people are now in a position to build startups, and you no longer need to be a computer science major. You no longer need as much capital as ever before. So you're seeing an explosion of company creation all around the world, and Europe has been privy to that as well. We're seeing extraordinary companies being built all around the world, in Paris, in Helsinki, in Stockholm, in Berlin. And it's leading to an amazing explosion in creativity and entrepreneurship that's frankly beautiful to observe. And we're only at the beginning of that, because most things still need to be invented in tech. We're still at the very beginning of the tech revolution in healthcare, education, public services. Most of B2B is still done through like relationships and Excel and email. And so everything needs to be invented, and European founders in Europe has a very big role to play. Now, maybe the more pessimistic angle is the institutions were highly bureaucratic, slow-moving, typically anti-tech and innovation, passing counterproductive laws, and we'll have to see what the mutualization of that looks like in a world where, at some point, post-pandemic, or not necessarily post-pandemic, but when the pandemic goes from pandemic to endemic, and we start dealing with it, I think the public focus and attention, and the government focus and attention, which I think is kind of like the Eye of Mordor in Lord of the Rings, can only focus on one thing at a time. And right now, all of the public attention is like all COVID all the time. And there was a time before that it was like kind of all Trump all the time. At some point when this ends and the pandemic is endemic, perhaps it'll go to, what happens to these massive budget deficits that we've created? Are they sustainable? How do we deal with the debt load? By the way, the outcomes are not necessarily all negative, but perhaps there will be some countries where it'll be deemed non-sustainable. And should there be a massive debt crisis over Italy, let's say, what would that look like? And what would the future of the EU look like in that context? Now, historically, they always find a way to muddle through. So I suspect, writ large, the EU project will probably continue. They'll find ways to muddle through and make things happen. It wouldn't be nearly as exciting as it could be should they have more liberal policies within in terms of being more pro innovation and pro disruption within the EU. But at the same time, there'll be an amazing explosion of productivity from startups that are happening. And some countries like France have actually been doing a really good job. I mean, in a way, the U.S. has become more like France now than France under Hollande had like 75% marginal tax rates, but then Macron changed like labor laws and brought the taxes to 30%. The U.S. has gone the other direction, where now if you're in California, you have a marginal tax rate of like 64% if you're a high income. Which, by the way, is extraordinarily dangerous when you have like 1% of your population paying 50% of all taxes. You give them a lot of power, and B, you're tying your destiny to them, which is not a very intelligent way of designing a tax system. But probably a conversation for another day. Edward Masinki, is the picture behind me an acceptable form of NFT? It is not. It happened to be a painting that was here already when I bought this place. After many travails and disasters in the real estate world. And after New York made Airbnbs mostly illegal, I got a place. But after realizing how painful construction is and the real estate world is and how bureaucratic and sclerotic, I decided to buy a place that is fully built, fully furnished, toothbrush ready. So I walked in with my toothbrush. I kept the staff that was already working there. I kept the furniture that was already working there, so I could focus my efforts life on the things that matter more to me, especially harnessing the deflationary power of technology as a means of making the world a better place and addressing the challenges of the 21st century, especially climate change, inequality of opportunity, and the mental and physical well-being crisis. Now, I do have a few NFTs. I was recently, I bought a few. There's VIP and Apex Optimizers, which is a community of people that are trying to like sleep better, be more physically more fit, work on nutrition, and yeah, and these, and I have one of those NFTs, and I use that in my Discord. So that's a much better NFT. If I had an easy way to share it, I don't think I have it large enough. Yeah, actually, I'll put it on my other screen. I'll share that briefly. This is, I own a few of them, but this is one of them. You can see it here. That's an NFT. The NFT behind me is not, or the painting behind me is not a proper NFT. And to continue on your question on what is my vision on the future of NFTs, look, NFTs can play different roles. The NFTs as art is one part of the market. The art market globally is about 50 billion, and I think NFTs have a role to play in that. But that is not what is the most exciting to me. NFTs as utility, and we're investors in the companies that are making utility NFTs, matter or more interesting to me, or using NFTs in gaming, perhaps as the equivalent of your skins in Fortnite, except owned by you, or more interesting. So I suspect that non-art NFTs will be a much, much, much larger market than art-specific NFTs. But there's definitely currently a lot of them. What's the hottest thing right now is art-related NFTs, but that's totally fine. Though I do think that's going for a crash. And by the way, I do think there's a crypto winter coming at some point. Winter is coming. When, obviously, is the big question, but it doesn't really matter. We're still laying the foundations of the blockchain, meaning of a decentralized internet. And there are many things that do better in a decentralized internet than in a centralized internet. There are many things that could and should be reinvented that way. I mean, to me, I can imagine medical records, voting records, and frankly, reinvention of finance, right? Like, why is it when I wire someone, it takes 3 days and there's no real-time tracking and it's expensive and complicated and the intermediaries are painful? Or if I sell stocks, it takes days to settle. This makes no sense. It should be completely real-time, and we should be getting it immediately for very, very low fees. And so especially finance, I think, should be reinvented through DeFi and through crypto, and it frankly is happening, which I think is part of the reason people like Jamie Dimon are like, fighting and saying how bad and negative these things are, because of course the incumbents are being threatened. Javier Palacios again. Do you have any thoughts on plant-based diets as a megatrend? Data indicates that our current diet as species is unsustainable. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts of where opportunities lie in consequence. So I suspect you mean our diet is unsustainable for the planet, meaning in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions that we have today, 25% coming from electricity, 16% from transportation, 20% manufacturing, 25% from actually food production, and specifically methane emissions from sheep and cows are the biggest culprits. And as humans are eating more and more meat as they become wealthier, these emissions are going in the wrong direction. And in fact, everything else is going in the right direction, by the way. We're going to be able to completely decarbonify electricity production in the next 20, 30 years because of solar and batteries. There's extraordinary evidence of how quickly this is happening because of the decreases in costs in solar and batteries. And so I'm extraordinarily bullish on that. The greenhouse gas emissions from eating are going to take longer. The one of the megatrends I was wondering about in the next 5 years is, are healthy diets or healthy living a megatrend? The thing is, if diet and exercise, were easy to do, we wouldn't have an obesity crisis. And so I suspect that people only do the thing that's right for them when it's easy. Now, plant-based specifically, I suspect, is not the correct answer at multiple levels. One is we are built to be omnivores. We were omnivores, when we were hunting the mammoth, et cetera. In fact, our diets were highly protein-based and animal-based back in the day. We're kind of built to be omnivores. I also don't love the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat, et cetera, because they're highly processed, not particularly healthy for you. I do think there's a solution. To me, the solution is going to be lab-grown meat, and we are big investors in lab-grown meat. We're investors in projects like Artemis. The issue is, because humans will only do what's right for them when it's in their economic interest for them, they will only move to lab-grown meat when it's just as good as the real thing, if you want, at the same price or lower. And it's going to take a while. We're probably a decade away from being at a point. I mean, right now you get meatballs that are not that tasty and very expensive. So we need to get it. And yes, maybe a subset of like the socioeconomic elite is willing to do that, but like for the masses, it's not viable. When the alternative is I go to a local whatever all-you-can-eat diner or a Burger King and you get like tons of calories, not the most healthiest calories, but for a very low price. So we're not quite there yet, and we will get there through lab-grown meat. It's going to take a decade probably. Anastasia, considering all changes we're encountering as a global society economy over the last few years and the rise of new concepts for communicating, collaborating, for instance, hybrid workspaces, the metaverse, how optimistic are you that we will be able to return back to a normal way of living and working? Has all this impacted your mindset? You find yourself accepting or reacting to the new norm? Well, the first question is, do we really want to go back to the old way of going to the office, and which has transaction costs in its own right? You have to commute there, you have to commute back. There's real estate costs involved in having that office to begin with, and there's a lot of face time. Now, I suspect that I think the answer, as usual, will be it depends. There's some businesses that will do better in remote, and there's some businesses that do better in person, and businesses in between. For us, for instance, at FJ, we've kind of realized that if you're at Zoom at home, in a way, you're more productive, right? You can do meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting without distractions, but you lose the creativity, the camaraderie, the sense of culture and unity. And so coming to the office a couple times a week, it could be 2, it could be 3, and sometimes you don't come in for a month, is actually an amazing way of coming up with new ideas, because the most interesting ideas actually come from like serendipity in where people are like crossing ideas, brainstorming. It happens over lunch or coffee and things that are unplanned and unstructured. And that's why, by the way, I structure my life in a way where I'm a month in New York, where it's super intense socially, professionally, etc. And then I'm a month not in New York, usually in a place like Turks and Caicos, where even though I'm working during the day, I'm doing my show, I'm doing calls, I'm doing emails, etc. I take the time to be reflective, and so I suspect that a hybrid type model will be the norm for many, at least knowledge workers, and not necessarily if you're working in a factory, etc. And it'll be fantastic. It'll be better for most. So I'm excited to see where the future holds, and I can see productivity increasing because of that. Right now, productivity is declining because of the supply chain issues. I hope that these are temporary, and we're going to be able to address them. Christopher Makel, do you think this will change business organizational structures and of employee, more stake in the game, independent people working towards the same goals, sharing the benefit via NFT? So there's definitely been a increase in entrepreneurship, and there's definitely been an increase in the passion economy, where you're in a position to monetize your true passion. There's this idea that if you can have 1,000 true followers, you can actually make a living regardless of what it is you're doing. And the Web 2 and now the Web 3 is actually allowing this to happen. Where if you're a writer, you can be on Substack. If you're a gamer, You can be on Twitch. If you're a B or C tier celebrity and you don't mind like sending people birthday videos, you could be on Cameo and wishing people a happy birthday. And we're seeing many versions of this for across different verticals, across different categories. If you're an artist, maybe you're on Patreon, you could be on YouTube. And we're seeing many of these as well on the blockchain. The companies like Socios or Chili's that are allowing like soccer teams and stars to make money. There are people that are allowing you to issue your own coin, either personally if you're a big brand or not, for different reasons. Perhaps it's for access to that person or for buying their merchandise. So there's definitely a revolution going on where more and more people are going to be able to make a living doing the things they love to do. That said, is it the end of all employees? No. It's a rise of self-entrepreneurship and people doing the passion economy. There will still be lots of people working for companies like Walmart and Microsoft and Google, etc. And we're going to live in this hybrid world, and people will do a bit of both. And perhaps some of the side jobs, will be their passion projects that ultimately, if they get lucky enough, they can make sufficient money that they can become their full job. Their full-time job, right? If your passion can be your profession, that's even better. But it's not necessarily given for everyone. And given that not everyone is going to have these 1,000 truth bands to do that. Next question. Going back to NFTs and connecting your origins in the classified media industry, how do you see the role of NFTs can help to play in traditional media and content companies like newspapers to find successful business models? Honestly, I haven't put too much thought into it. I suspect that the people that are more likely to benefit are the disruptors rather than the incumbents, just because they're smarter and also because the ethos of the Web3 world and the crypto world is decentralization. And so it feels more targeted towards individuals and the creator economy than towards helping media companies succeed. Now, media companies, I think, need to have a clear mission for where they stand. And so I think there are two models that can work. Either you have a big brand and you can live off of subscriptions, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, probably Time Magazine, or you're a hyper local or covering a category that's very specific. But the people that are in the middle, trying to be a little bit of everything to anyone, will die. But that's not just true of media. That's really true of all categories, right? Like either you're the low cost provider, you're Amazon and Walmart, or you're like LVMH and Gucci in the other end. And if you're in the middle, the JCPenney's and Sears, etc., you kind of die. And that's okay. And that's true, by the way, in every single category and industry. The most interesting, probably in media from a content creation perspective, is Substack. Finding people, amazing authors that actually can make a lot more money and be completely independent from an editorial line on Substack through having subscribers instead of working for whatever. It doesn't matter if it's Time or Elle or People magazine. I think makes a lot of sense to me. And that's a huge innovation in the creator economy. I follow many writers in Substack, and it's an amazing business model. People like No Opinion on like the economic optimism, etc., are things that you're near and dear to my heart. Edward Masinski, is universal basic income coming in the near future? Techno-socialism started by the mayor sharing Citicoin revenues, and can you, with that, describe in Techno-Socialism book by Brett King? Unclear. Unclear to me. I haven't looked enough at the studies. I have to look at the cost-benefit analysis. I think we should definitely do a better job at helping the needy. We no longer have equality of opportunity in this country, and by this country I mean the U.S., where social mobility has declined for a variety of reasons. I mean, we teach if you're in a bad neighborhood, you go to bad local public schools because they're funded by property taxes that are local. There are a whole bunch of factors. I mean, we've created or limited construction in the major cities to the point that the major cities that are the economic superstars that are creating all the jobs and growth, they're no longer accessible to many, and people are no longer moving across cities as a result of that, which used to be an amazing strength of the U.S. And there are a whole bunch of other factors. And so should we help the needy and create opportunities for them? Absolutely. Could UBI be a solution for that? Absolutely. But it would require a fundamental reinvention of all of our existing entitlement systems, and frankly, eliminating all of them to replace them with us. And I suspect that it's probably not in the political cards anytime soon. And so if we get it, it's probably going to be like tiny amounts. It would not be the equivalent of like helping people have independence. So it'll be like $1,000 a year as opposed to probably a minimum of like 10,000 or 15,000 that we would need. But that would also require removing all the other types of entitlements, which probably makes sense, right? Like that currently in most Western countries, most of the benefits are going to the middle class as opposed to the people that need it the most, because they're the largest component of voters. And so it's kind of like an inefficient way of taking money out of your left pocket in the form of taxes, giving it back to you in the right pocket in the form of services and benefits by the government in a very inefficient way, minus chunk of inefficiency in the middle. So probably not the correct approach. I would much prefer UBI, but done intelligently and with a full fundamental reinvention of our benefit system, catering and targeting especially the neediest, right? The most underprivileged part of the population would benefit from it the most. My brother on YouTube is asking, if you were leading the US, what are the 3 things you would focus on? The first thing I would focus on is solving the housing crisis. And the easiest way to do that is by eliminating or completely limiting all the rules around construction, zoning laws, landmark, and air rights. And the reason I would do that is if you look at on a cost-benefit analysis, all the things you can do and its impact on GDP, the ability to allow people to move and to have different socioeconomic classes in the superstar cities wherever they are, and those obviously change over time, actually has by far the largest impact on the economy. And so if we can start building again and building cheaply, as we used to be able to, right? We built the Empire State Building in less than 2 years, the Golden Gate Bridge in less than 2 years, super effectively. We can increase supply to the point of we can make these major cities affordable again, and we can solve the problems. I mean, right now you have like over 80% of San Francisco zoned to no apartments, no more than two floor multi houses, as opposed to single family homes, as opposed to big apartment buildings. And now I understand the value of zoning and landmark, et cetera, if you're in Paris, but if you're in New York, build up. Increase supply infinitely, get prices down, get people to come to the city will thrive and do better for it. And you'll also create an ecosystem where people of all social classes can do well, and you're going to re-jumpstart both physical mobility, economic mobility, and social mobility. Probably would be the one thing I would do. And right now we're not capable in the US of building infrastructure very effectively. So let's solve that. That'd probably be number one thing I would do. And maybe the most important in the soul. I'd have to think through what the other 2 are. Nothing comes to mind just immediately, just because I've like on the cost benefit analysis, most things are like pale in comparison. Caleb, would I invest in a drone delivery company, or do I invest in them? Definitely not in companies that would make the drones, but maybe that use the drones. So the app, not the underlying technology, but the application of technology, maybe. If the unit economics work, if it's scalable, if it makes sense, TBD. I would have to look at the deck and decide if it makes sense or not. Okay, let's go back to some of the pre-prepared questions. Do you think BTC or one of the crypto will be a means of value exchange when humans go interplanetary, since most natural resources are widely available in space, like gold? I suspect that a form of money, which will not be based on anything. We need to remember, money is a fiction, right? Like if a piece of paper, the $100 bill, only has value because we believe it has value, and we agree that it has value, but we do need a means of exchange. And that's why, by the way, most crypto are not currencies. A currency is a readily accepted tender of exchange that is pretty flexible, that's easy and inexpensive to transact in, and that is a store of value. And most of the crypto is not that. They're like tokens to buy utility in whatever underlying network you're using for whatever application you're using. So it need not be crypto. Probably makes sense if the money we use is digital. I suspect it will not be based on a commodity because that makes absolutely no sense. It'll be in whatever fictional currency we agree is going to be a means of exchange. May or may not be the US dollar, and may or may not be a representation of that in the future. But probably digital probably makes the most sense. And by the way, there's a big case to be made, and someone wrote a very interesting article on the economics of Star Trek for at the point in the future where you get like the replicator, where anything can be built essentially for cheap, for free. So they argue, they went all the way, like there will be no more currency. So I disagree with that. There will still be constrained resources. You know, for instance, lands on Earth or beachfront property will be constrained. So probably will still have a form of currency. Now the jobs might be very different. Maybe prestige will matter more than the amount of money you have. So perhaps, you know, you're going to choose to be a starship captain, and that'll be rewarded in the prestige of being the captain. And so you do it for its own merit, right? Like it'll be a source of purpose as opposed to being a source of compensation, because frankly, anything you would ever want could be obtained for free. Obviously, this is a kind of the utopia of Star Trek: The Next Generation. We're far away from there, but that's why I love technology. It's deflationary, and every day we go in the future, we're making that future come earlier because we're making things accessible to the masses at lower and lower prices. Alexandre Salem, what do you think the next paradigm shift for gaming is? Do you think it's VR AR? Do you think it's a business model evolution from subscription instead of freemium, or ownership models? VR AR feels a bit early still, to be honest, even though the Quest 2 is pretty amazing. The games, there's still latency. You still get motion sickness. The graphics are nowhere near as good as they are in the Xbox X or the PS5. And there are no non-gaming applications for it. Well, I guess here we're talking gaming. So I suspect we're still years away from getting to the point where it'll be mass market and where enough people will have it that you're going to see a game where 20, 30, 40 million units are sold, or frankly, if you even have that many VR headsets on the same platform. So I think it's early for VR and AR still. I think it'll be fun to play with, and you could go to places like VR World to take advantage of it. Not sure I would go and build a big VR AR company right now. In terms of business model evolution, I think it depends. Subscription works great for some games and MMOs, but frankly, the direction is more in the other direction right now. We're going more towards free-to-play games where people are buying skins, and in fact, the NFT that could be represented by NFTs might make more sense in the future than going the other direction. So I think premium is probably here to stay. People like things that are free and free to play and using skins. I don't like pay to win games, by the way. So games where the more money I spend, the more likely I am to win. Those I really hate, and I will never play them, but they were very popular, especially in Asia. But the premium games where you buy skins and personalization, I think make a lot of sense. Will continue to play a very big role. Now, the biggest innovation in gaming, I think I touched upon it earlier, is actually the play to earn games where you are paid in order to play the game. And a company like Axie Infinity, today at least, you can make about $1,000 a month, and the people in the Philippines are playing the game a lot because they actually make more money playing the game than they can in their real job in real life. And so there will be many more games like that using these types of economics and models coming in the future, and hopefully many of them will be more playable and more fun. I see another question that was pre-posted by Edward and Yaniv. We kind of touched on it, as how big NFTs will be. And as I said, NFTs I think will be bigger, or will be huge, but the bigger market of NFTs will not be art. I think that'll be like a $50 billion market in the end. It'll be utility NFTs and NFTs for gaming and other things. Andre Korshigan asks, post-pandemic boosts the shopping mall small online. Would the situation promote unmanaged marketplaces with low transaction fees like grocery stores? Not sure I quite get the question, but definitely the pandemic has boosted online shopping writ large. There's definitely been a megatrend independent of that from buying small and buying local, et cetera, though not necessarily from local grocery stores. In the local grocery store business, the mega trend here is the 15-minute grocery delivery, based not out of grocery stores, which actually have a high cost structure, but based out of dark stores. So the huge trend has really been a company like Joker will have like 300 dark stores in New York, and you order and boom, you get your groceries delivered in like sub 15 minutes. So I think the average delivery time is like 7 to 9 minutes. Completely mind-boggling, and really falls in the mega trend of faster, better, cheaper, which the internet is all about. So that will completely continue. And I think the transition to online ordering and online everything will continue. And so we've had a step change in penetration, which will continue on a go-forward basis. Sharon Shaltoon, would be great to hear your thoughts and experiences about the importance of even need of having a user experience strategy with regards to success or failure of a startup. Well, yes, as usual, it depends. If you're building and the next generation AI, the AI working, probably more important than the UX UI you're building around it. If you're same thing, if you're building a self-driving vehicle, etc. But for many things, the UX UI is the key, right? Like the magic of Uber is how much better that experience was relative to a taxi. And so for most companies, when they are built, have a product person. In fact, often the CEO is the product person. There's been a transition of the founder being the technology head to the founder being the product head. And that trend is continuing. So I think most companies have a product strategy from the get-go, and the UX UI you use matters absolutely fundamentally. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, your job is in UX UI. So it's here to say it plays a huge role. And it matters. So, of course, in some cases, especially it matters more than others. I think we're reaching the end of our questions, both live and pre-prepared. So with that, I'll pause it. Actually, wait, one more. Your thoughts on social tokens and decentralized identity. I actually think I can very well imagine a means of having identity in the blockchain, and so can make a lot of sense. Now, social tokens, again, the problem is the devil is in details in these things and what you want to use them for, etc. What I would not want to end up with is a China type model where it's controlled by your social credit status, or status controlled in a way by the government. Now, of course, you're suggesting a decentralized identity, but nonetheless, what are you using it for, etc. But could I imagine the creating identity proofs in the blockchain? Absolutely, and would make a lot of sense. In fact, we're investing in a few companies that are doing things like that. Anyway, I think with that, I'll pause it for today. It's been an amazing year, an amazing season. It's been super fun to interact with all of you on Playing the Unicorns, and I look forward to seeing all of you next year. So with that, happy holidays, happy new year for when that comes, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.